The heavy doors of the grand hall creaked as they slowly opened, echoing through the chamber like a grim warning. She stood at the entrance, her body trembling beneath the weight of her punishment. Serena, the alien princess of the Vixari Dominion, had never imagined this would be her fate. Her people, her own blood, had condemned her to this, a marriage to a human, not out of love or tradition, but as a punishment for a crime she was not even sure she had committed. A crime so monstrous that no one dared speak its name. Today was the day she would marry him. Her eyes scanned the room, filled with her people, their faces carved in stone, all of them watching her with a cold detachment. They had all seen it. Yet the punishment that had led her here, the fall from grace that left her standing at the crossroads of fate. Serena had once been revered, adored even, but now she was a prisoner, shackled not by chains, but by the decree of those who had once called her their leader. A soft breeze stirred her long silver hair, blowing it across her face, but she didn't flinch. She couldn't afford to show weakness. Not now, not ever again. Her heart raced, 1,000 emotions crashing over her at once, but she forced herself to focus. The human stood at the altar, his back to her, his hands tied in front of him as, though he were a mere puppet in a play he hadn't volunteered to star in. His name was Adam, and to her he was nothing more than a tool, a symbol of her punishment. Yet as her gaze settled on him, something unexpected stirred within her. A strange, inexplicable pull, a flicker of curiosity. She knew nothing about him, yet everything in her being screamed to stay away. Adam turned, as if sensing her presence, his eyes meeting hers. There was no fear in his gaze, no hatred, only an unsettling calmness, like a man who had accepted that fate had already decided. For him, his eyes, dark but warm, locked with hers, and for a fleeting moment Serena felt something stir deep inside her. Something more than just the unnatural bond that tied them together. Something raw, something that terrified her. Princess Serena. The High Priestess's voice broke through her thoughts, the ancient words of the ceremony rolling off her tongue as she began the ritual. The room fell silent, and Serena's heart dropped into her stomach. She stepped forward, the weight of the ceremony pressing down on her shoulders like an anchor. Every step felt like it took her farther away from the person she had once been, and closer to a life she never chose. The crowd was silent, watching with bated breath as the priestess continued. You are here today, not out of choice, but out of necessity. The union of Vixari and human, a symbol of punishment, a symbol of submission. Do you, Serena of the Vixari Dominion, accept this bond? Her mind screamed to say no, to rebel, to run, to scream out against the injustice of it all. But her voice betrayed her, a soft whisper escaping her lips as she replied, I accept. The words tasted bitter in her mouth. She didn't know why she had said them. Perhaps it was the pressure of the eyes on her, the pressure of her people, who waited for her to do as they commanded. Or perhaps it was the knowledge that resistance would only bring more pain. Either way, it was done. Adam stepped forward, his gaze never leaving hers, as the priestess continued the ceremony. The alien woman draped a heavy ceremonial cloak over Adam's shoulders, signaling the finalization of the union. Serena's heart pounded harder in her chest as he turned toward her. The crowd began to murmur, the anticipation building. This was the moment she was expected to marry a human, to fulfill the decree handed down by her people. But the moment Adam's fingers brushed against her skin, something inside her snapped. It wasn't the cold, mechanical touch of a stranger. No, it was something more. Something that made her blood run hot and her body tense. Her breath caught in her throat, and for a moment the world around her faded. All that existed was him. His fingers lingered, just barely grazing her skin, and yet it felt as if the entire universe had shifted. Serena's pulse raced. Her mind screamed for her to pull away, but her body betrayed her, holding her in place. It wasn't just a physical touch. It was something deeper, something primal, something she didn't understand. For the first time in her life, Serena was no longer in control. Her body responded to him, to the connection they now shared, and it was terrifying. It was unlike anything she had ever felt before. She quickly pulled her hand away, but the damage was done. The connection had been made, and there was no going back. Her heart was pounding in her chest, her thoughts a tangled mess. She couldn't make sense of what had just happened. What did it mean? Was it just a passing sensation, a side effect of the bond forced upon her? Or was there something more? She couldn't tell. She didn't want to know. As the ceremony ended, and the crowd began to disperse, Serena found herself standing beside Adam, her heart still racing, her mind in turmoil. He turned to her, his eyes searching hers, as though trying to decipher what she was feeling. "Are you all right?" His voice was soft, warm, genuine. Serena recoiled slightly. What was he doing? Why was he acting like this? They were strangers. She had nothing to say to him. Nothing at all. But before she could speak, he spoke again, his words piercing through the barrier she had built around herself. "I don't want to hurt you," he said, his gaze sincere. "I never did. I'm just as trapped in this as you are." Her breath caught in her throat. How could he say something like that? How could he seem so calm, so composed, when her entire world had just crumbled beneath her feet? "I don't want to be here either," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Adam's expression softened, and for the first time, Serena saw a flicker of something real behind his eyes. Empathy, understanding, a reflection of her own confusion. It terrified her. She took a step back, shaking her head. This wasn't supposed to be happening. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He wasn't supposed to make her feel this way. "You don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice growing more firm as she fought to regain control. "You don't know me. You don't know what I've been through." He took a step closer, his gaze never wavering. "Then let me know you. Let me help." She stared at him, the words heavy on her tongue. She wanted to scream at him, to tell him to leave her alone. But instead she found herself speechless. There was something in his eyes, something that made her hesitate. For a brief moment, just a fleeting moment, Serena considered the possibility that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't as simple as it seemed. Before she could respond, the door to the hall slammed open, and two guards stepped forward. Their eyes were cold, and their presence reminded Serena that she was no longer the princess of her people. She was just a prisoner, bound by the chains of her people's choices. Adam stepped between her and the guards, his posture protective. "Stay back," he warned, his voice low and determined. Serena's heart skipped a beat as she watched him. Was this human really trying to protect her? Was this the same man who had been forced into a marriage he didn't want? The guards hesitated, clearly unsure of how to proceed. Serena's mind raced. What was going on? Why was Adam standing up for her? What did this mean? Before she could ask, one of the guards spoke, his voice sharp. "The ceremony is over. Your punishment is complete. Now you will be taken to your quarters." Serena's mind spun as the reality of her situation settled in. She was trapped. There was no escape, no hope, or so she thought. As the guards moved to take her away, Serena's gaze locked with Adam's once more. This time, there was no hesitation. There was no fear, only something else, something that she couldn't yet name. One touch, one simple touch, had changed everything. The corridors of the Vixari Palace felt colder than Serena had ever known. She had walked them 1,000 times before, each step marked by the heavy weight of her responsibilities as the princess. But now, as she was led by the guards through the winding hallways, Her footsteps echoed with an eerie finality, each one a reminder of the fate she could not escape. Adam walked beside her, a silent presence in the midst of her confusion. She could feel the weight of his gaze, the warmth of it, even without looking directly at him. He wasn't a monster, she reminded herself. He was just a man caught in the same trap as she was. But that didn't make her feel any better. As they reached the door to her chambers, Serena stopped. The guards behind her paused, waiting for her to make her next move. "I need to be alone," she said, her voice sharp, more out of instinct than anything else. The guards exchanged glances, but Serena's commanding tone was enough to make them step aside, opening the door without a word. She stepped inside, breathing in the familiar, cold air of her private space, but there was nothing familiar about it now. Everything had changed. Adam followed her in, his presence almost suffocating in its intensity. "Why are you here?" Serena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She had tried to fight the connection earlier, to push him away, but here he was, stepping into her space as though they had known each other for years. Adam's eyes softened. "I'm not leaving you, Serena. Not when you need someone the most." She felt a flicker of anger, but it was quickly replaced by something else, a gnawing fear. She didn't want to need him. She didn't want to need anyone, especially not a human. But she couldn't ignore the pull. Something about him made her feel seen. "I didn't ask for this," she said, her voice shaking with frustration. "You don't understand. You're a prisoner of the same system that I am. You're a punishment, a symbol. You're not real." Adam didn't flinch at her harsh words. Instead, he took a step closer, his voice soft. "And yet I'm here. I'm real, Serena. More real than I've ever been in my life." Serena swallowed hard, the pain of the situation cutting deep into her chest. She wanted to scream at him, to tell him to leave her alone, but there was something in his eyes, a quiet sincerity that held her in place. "You don't understand," she repeated, her voice barely audible. "I've spent my entire life preparing to be the ruler of the Vixari Dominion. I've done everything by the book, everything my people expected of me. And now I'm nothing, a prisoner, a pawn in a game I never chose to play." Adam didn't say anything for a long moment. He stood there silent, as if considering her words carefully. Finally he spoke. "I don't understand your world, Serena, but I understand punishment. I understand loss. I know what it's like to have everything taken from you, to feel like you're standing on the edge of nothing. So, maybe I'm the last person you want to hear this from, but you don't have to go through this alone." The vulnerability in his voice struck a chord deep within her. Serena closed her eyes, pressing her hands against her temples. She couldn't think. She couldn't breathe. "Why?" she whispered, barely trusting herself to speak. "Why are you doing this? Why are you trying to help me?" Adam's gaze softened and he took another step closer. He was so close now that she could feel the heat of his body, his presence overwhelming in a way she didn't expect. "Because you need someone," he said simply. "And I'm here. I may not know the first thing about your world or your people, but I know that I'm not going anywhere." Serena met his gaze, her heart pounding as a strange mix of emotions surged through her. Her chest tightened with confusion, and she felt an overwhelming urge to push him away, to keep him at arm's length. But she couldn't, not with the way he looked at her, not with the way his words resonated in her soul. "Why me?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "Why did they choose me for this punishment?" Adam looked at her with a mixture of sympathy and curiosity, but he didn't answer right away. He simply sat down across from her on the floor, keeping his distance, respecting her space. "I wish I had the answers," he said quietly. "But what I do know is that this doesn't have to be the end for you, Serena. You're stronger than this. You've got more inside of you than you know." Serena wanted to laugh. She wanted to tell him how wrong he was. But the words caught in her throat. He didn't know her. He didn't know the weight she carried, the expectations, the responsibility, the endless pressure to be perfect. He couldn't possibly understand, but in some small corner of her mind, she couldn't help but wonder if he was right. She had always been taught to see weakness as the enemy, to show no vulnerability, to be the unshakable ruler her people expected her to be. But now, as she sat in this room with him, all those rules seemed meaningless. She was no longer the princess, no longer the leader. She was just human, and that terrified her. "I don't know how to be this person," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how to be anything but what I've been trained to be, what they made me be." Adam studied her for a long moment, his eyes filled with understanding. "You don't have to be what they made you, Serena. You can choose to be who you want to be." Her heart skipped a beat. "And what if I don't know who that is?" Adam's voice was steady, calm. "Then we'll figure it out together. You're not alone." Serena felt a lump form in her throat. She didn't want to admit it, but for the first time in days, she didn't feel completely lost. Maybe there was hope for her. Maybe there was a way out of this, even if she didn't yet know what that way looked like. But just as she was about to respond, a loud bang on the door interrupted them. "Princess Serena," a voice called from the other side. "The council demands your presence." The words sent a jolt of panic through her. The council, her people, the ones who had condemned her to this fate. She felt the walls of her prison closing in around her once again. Adam rose to his feet, his eyes narrowing. As he glanced toward the door, "Don't go," he said, his voice firm. Serena hesitated. She could feel the weight of her responsibilities pressing down on her, but at that moment she wasn't sure if she could face them. Could she really go back to the council, face her people, and pretend that everything was normal? "I have no choice," she said quietly. "I have to go. This is my duty." But as she reached for the door, Adam's hand caught hers. "No, you don't, not anymore." Serena turned to face him, her heart pounding. "I don't know what you think you're doing, Adam," she said, her voice low. "But this isn't something you can fix. I can't fix it." He didn't release her hand. Instead, he stepped closer, his voice full of determination. "Maybe you can't fix it alone. But you're not alone anymore, not if you don't want to be." The door was still banging, louder now. The pressure was mounting, but Serena stood there staring at him, her heart torn between the woman she had been and the woman she was starting to become. For the first time, Serena wondered if Adam might be right. Maybe she could change her fate. Maybe she could change everything. The council's demands echoed in Serena's mind long after the guards had left her chambers. The oppressive weight of their judgment lingered in the air, thick and suffocating, wrapping around her like an iron chain she couldn't escape. They wanted answers, and they would not wait. The rules of their world demanded it, and she was still bound to them, even if she didn't want to be. But as Serena stared at the door, she couldn't help but think of the moment she had shared with Adam. His words, his touch. She had never known anyone like him, never. The connection that had sparked between them was undeniable, and it was growing stronger with every passing second. Yet, with every moment, the consequences of her new reality came crashing down harder. Adam stood behind her, silent, but his presence was a constant comfort. It was as though the storm in her heart couldn't quite reach her when he was near. "I have to go," Serena whispered, more to herself than to him. The weight of her responsibility was overwhelming, but something deep inside her had changed. She wasn't the princess she once was. She didn't know who she was anymore, but she couldn't face the council without understanding that first. Adam didn't move. He didn't try to stop her. Instead, he simply nodded, his eyes holding a depth of understanding that made Serena's heart ache. "I'm not going to stop you," he said softly, "but I'll be here, whatever you decide." Serena swallowed hard. The idea of him staying behind as her lifeline, as the only person who truly understood her, gave her the strength she needed. She wasn't alone, not anymore. Taking a deep breath, she opened the door, stepping into the cold, sterile corridor beyond. The palace, her former sanctuary, felt alien to her now. The grand walls, the elegant halls, it was all a facade, a hollow shell of the life she had been told to live. Now, everything felt so fragile, so brittle, as if it could crumble under. The weight of truth. The council's chamber loomed ahead, and Serena's heart began to race. Each step took her closer to the inevitable, closer to facing the ones who had sentenced her to this nightmare. But as she approached the massive doors, her fingers brushed against the smooth surface, and an unexpected thought struck her. What if I don't go in? What if she simply turned around, walked away, and left it all behind? The thought was intoxicating, but the cold reality of her duty weighed heavily on her, dragging her back to the harsh truth. Serena had no choice. She was bound by her people's expectations, her bloodline, and the inescapable destiny they had crafted for her. The doors opened, and she stepped into the council's presence, her every movement scrutinized, every breath dissected. The members of the Vixari Council, high-ranking officials and diplomats, sat before her, their faces stone-cold masks of authority. They looked at her with contempt, their eyes full of judgment. They were the ones who had decided her punishment, and they were the ones who would expect her to bow to their will. Princess Serena, the head counselor Myrath, said in a voice, "Like ice, you are summoned here to answer for your actions, for your defiance against the laws of the Dominion." Serena stood tall, refusing to let them see her falter. She would not give them the satisfaction. Her eyes met Myrath's with a quiet defiance, a flicker of the woman she had once been. But as she stood there, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. She wasn't the same princess who had stood in this chamber a mere week ago. She had been forced into a position she didn't choose, one that had shattered everything she thought she knew about her world. "My defiance," Serena repeated, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. Or was it simply a refusal to submit to an unjust system? Myrath's cold eyes narrowed. "You are no longer in a position to question the system. You've been sentenced, and your punishment is clear. You will marry the human prisoner. This is your fate." Serena's heart raced. She had been told this over and over, but now that it was being spoken in such a direct, forceful way, it was harder to deny the truth. The weight of her punishment was suffocating. She had once been powerful, once been the future of the Vixari Dominion. Now she was nothing but a pawn in a cruel game. "Punishment," Serena said, her voice trembling but defiant. "Is that what this is to you, a punishment?" Her eyes swept over the council, her gaze lingering on the few familiar faces. "Or is it fear?" "Fear," Myrath scoffed, standing from his seat. "Fear of what? You, a princess stripped of her power? You are nothing but a symbol now, a warning to those who dare defy the law." Serena clenched her fists at her sides, the rage building within her. She wanted to scream, to lash out, to tear this place apart. But she knew better than to give in to her emotions. The Vixari were a people of logic and control. Losing control would be the one thing that would guarantee her failure. But just as the tension in the room was about to boil over, a quiet voice broke through the silence. "Perhaps it's not about fear at all." Adam's voice echoed from behind Serena. He had entered the chamber unnoticed and now stood at the entrance, his presence both calming and intense. All eyes turned to him, and Serena could see the shock on the faces of the council members. Myrath's expression darkened, and for the first time there was a flicker of unease in his eyes. "You?" Myrath sneered. "What are you doing here, human?" Adam's gaze locked with Serena's. There was no fear in his eyes, only unwavering support. "I'm here for her, because she deserves to be heard, and if you think you can continue to treat her like this without consequences, then you are mistaken." The room fell into stunned silence. Serena could feel the weight of the moment, the enormity of the choice she was about to make. She had always known that she was the one who held the future of her people in her hands. But now, for the first time, she felt the power to change her own fate. "You're not going to force her into this marriage," Adam said, his voice firm. "Not if she doesn't want it. Not if she chooses otherwise." Myrath's face turned a shade darker. "You have no place here. The laws are clear. The princess's punishment is final." Serena's heart raced as she faced the council, Adam standing by her side. The tension in the room was unbearable, and the weight of her destiny pressed down on her chest like an invisible force. But as she stood there, something inside her began to shift. She wasn't just Serena, the princess, anymore. She was something more, something stronger. "Actually," Serena said, her voice steady and calm, "I don't accept this punishment. Not anymore." The council members gasped. Myrath's jaw clenched, and for the first time, the cold, impenetrable armor of his authority began to crack. "You have no choice," Myrath growled. "You cannot escape your fate. You are bound by the laws of the Dominion." Serena took a deep breath, her mind clear for the first time in days. "I'm bound by no one but myself." A murmur swept through the room, but Serena didn't wait for a response. She turned to Adam, the man who had stood by her when no one else would. And for the first time, Serena smiled. The room was frozen in a moment of stunned silence. And Serena knew deep in her bones that everything was about to change. Serena's decision to stand against the council was a declaration of war, but one that had no clear victor. The silence in the room stretched long after she had spoken. The words hung in the air, thick and heavy with the weight of their consequences. "I don't accept this punishment," she had said. The shock in the council chamber was palpable. The faces that once regarded her with reverence, admiration, and fear now looked at her with disbelief, and perhaps something worse, contempt. The ancient laws of the Vixari Dominion had never been challenged, not by a princess, not by anyone. But here she was, rejecting them, claiming her own fate. Myrath's face twisted with fury. His normally calm, calculating expression was now an open sneer of disdain. "You will regret this, princess," he spat. "You cannot just discard centuries of tradition for your whims. You've already dishonored the Dominion. If you think this will end in any way other than with your submission, you are gravely mistaken." Serena met his gaze without flinching. "I don't care about your traditions. I care about the truth. And I will no longer be a pawn in your game." A murmur of astonishment rippled through the council members, but no one dared speak. Myrath's authority had always been absolute, but Serena's words had cracked it, if only for a moment. She turned to Adam, standing unwaveringly at her side. His presence was a pillar of strength, a silent promise that she wasn't alone in this fight. His steady, unwavering gaze met hers, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, she felt truly seen. Not as the princess with royal blood coursing through her veins, but as the woman she had always wanted to be. "Are you certain?" Adam asked quietly, his voice gentle. But there was a rawness to it that made Serena pause. She glanced back at the council, the weight of her defiance settling into her chest like a stone. "I've never been more certain of anything in my life." For the first time she smiled, not a forced, duty-bound smile, but one that was free of the chains that had once bound her. It was the smile of someone choosing their own path, but with that choice came consequences. "I'll take full responsibility," Serena continued, addressing the council. "If you wish to banish me, do so. If you wish to strip me of my title and my birthright, do it. But I will not marry him, not like this, not under your demands." The room fell into stunned silence, but it was broken only by the cold, measured voice of Myreth. "You are a fool," he said, his voice quiet, but laced with an unmistakable venom. "You have no idea what you are doing. You are condemning yourself and your people." Serena's heart pounded in her chest. "Then I'll accept whatever comes next, but I won't bow to a system that has enslaved us for centuries." Myreth's hand slammed down onto the table, the sound echoing through the chamber. His eyes flashed with cold fury, but Serena didn't flinch. The power he once held over her, over everyone in the room, was crumbling before her eyes. "You are making a grave mistake, Princess. You will face the full consequences of this defiance, and you will regret it." Serena's pulse quickened, but she stood firm. "I'd rather regret choosing my own path than live in a world where I'm forced to play a part I never asked for." With one final glare, Myreth turned on his heel, signaling the end of the council. "Meeting." "You'll regret this," he muttered under his breath as he stalked out of the chamber. The rest of the council members remained in their seats, uncertain of what to say or do. Serena could feel their eyes on her, but she didn't, or care. She had made her choice, and there was no going back. Adam moved to stand beside her, his hand gently touching her arm. His presence was a steady anchor in the storm that had just begun. "Are you sure about this?" he asked again, his voice softer this time. Serena looked at him, a hint of vulnerability in her gaze that she rarely showed. "I have to be. This is who I am now. I've spent too long hiding behind the walls of a life that wasn't mine. I won't be that person anymore." Adam nodded, his expression unreadable. "Then we'll face it together." As the last of the council members filed out, leaving Serena and Adam alone in the chamber, the weight of what she had just done began to settle over her like a thick fog. She had defied her people, her birthright, everything she had been taught to value. But in its place, something new had begun to stir within her, a sense of freedom, of power, of autonomy. But that freedom came at a price. Outside the palace walls, the air was thick with the tension of an impending storm. Serena could feel the shift in the atmosphere as she and Adam walked side by side, leaving the council chamber behind. News of her defiance would spread like wildfire through the Dominion, and with it would come the backlash. Serena had been a symbol of power and tradition, and now she had become a symbol of rebellion. It was a dangerous position to be in, but it was one that felt right. Still, she knew the Vixari would not forgive her so easily. Their pride had been wounded, and their anger would be fierce. "I don't know what comes next," Serena said, her voice quieter now as she looked up at Adam. "But I can't go back." "You won't," Adam said with conviction. "You've already taken the first step, and I'll be right beside you, no matter what comes next." Serena smiled, but there was a sadness in her eyes. She knew Adam meant every word, but she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that their journey was just beginning, and it would be filled with obstacles neither of them could yet comprehend. As they reached her private quarters, the door closed behind them, shutting out the rest of the world. Serena sank into the chair by the window, her mind racing with everything that had just transpired. The weight of the council's rejection, the betrayal of her people's laws, it all threatened to crush her. But Adam was there. He had promised her he would stand with her, and for now, that was enough. "I need to know more about you, Adam," Serena said softly, her voice distant as she stared out into the night sky. "I don't think I can face this alone." Adam stepped closer, sitting down next to her. "And you won't have to. We're in this together." She looked at him, seeing him not just as the man who had touched her life in ways she couldn't fully comprehend, but as the ally she never expected. There was a depth to him that she was only beginning to understand, and it terrified her to admit how much she relied on him now. "I never thought I'd be in this position," Serena confessed. "Never thought I'd be defying my own people, my own history." "Sometimes," Adam replied gently, "you have to break the chains that bind you in order to find your freedom. You've done that, Serena, and now you get to decide what happens next." Serena nodded, feeling the weight of his words. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt the faintest glimmer of hope. But as the hours passed and the palace fell silent, Serena knew the council would not let this go. They would not forget her defiance, and they would do whatever it took to bring her back into line. The battle was only just beginning. Serena's world had changed in ways she could barely comprehend. The council's fury was no longer a distant threat, but a very real presence that loomed over her every moment. As the days passed, the air in the palace felt heavier, the silence between her and the other members of the royal family more oppressive. The tension in the kingdom was palpable. News of her defiance had spread like wildfire, and the people were divided. Some hailed her as a hero, a symbol of rebellion, while others saw her as a traitor who would bring ruin upon their civilization. The weight of their expectations pressed down on her, and yet through it all, Adam remained by her side. He had become her rock, the one constant in a world that was rapidly falling apart. But even his presence couldn't erase the gnawing fear in her chest, the fear that the council, Myrath especially, would stop at nothing to make her pay for her actions. It was a morning like any other, but the air felt different. The birds outside were unusually quiet, and the servants who passed by her chambers walked with hurried steps, their faces drawn with concern. Serena could feel the ripple in the atmosphere, as if something terrible was about to happen. She had just finished a private meeting with her advisors, who had given her grim news. The council had begun mobilizing their forces, preparing to punish not just her, but anyone who had supported her. Her closest allies were being quietly removed from the palace, sent away on missions that felt more like exile. The message was clear: defy the council, and you would be erased. Adam had been there, standing silently beside her, his presence grounding her in the chaos. But there was a new hardness in his eyes now, a reflection of the growing danger they were both facing. "I don't know how much longer we can keep this up," Serena had whispered to him earlier that day. "The council is moving faster than I thought. They're not just after me, they're targeting everyone I care about." Adam had only nodded. "I know, and I won't let them take you, Serena, not without a fight." But Serena knew that Adam, for all his strength, was only human. The Vixari Dominion was a far-reaching empire, one with immense power, and she could see the cracks starting to show in their defenses. That night, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the tension in the palace reached its peak. A messenger arrived with a sealed letter from Myrath. The letter was short, a mere formality, but its contents made Serena's blood run cold. "You have made your choice, Princess. The consequences will be severe. Your fate will be decided tomorrow. You will either submit or you will suffer. The Vixari Dominion does not tolerate defiance." It was a threat, one that Serena had known was coming, but seeing it in writing, seeing the words laid out before her, made it all the more real. She could almost hear Myrath's voice in her mind taunting her, reminding her of just how insignificant her rebellion truly was. She stared at the letter for a long time, her mind racing. She had made her choice, and there was no turning back. But the fear, the crippling fear, was still there. She had always known that defying the council would have consequences, but now she was about to face them. Adam entered the room just as she was folding the letter. He could see the strain in her eyes, the weight of the decision that had been thrust upon her. "You've received it, haven't you?" he asked, his voice quiet but laced with concern. Serena nodded, her throat tight. "Tomorrow. It's all going to come to a head tomorrow." Adam crossed the room and knelt before her, taking her hands in his. "Whatever happens, I'm with you. We'll face this together." But Serena knew that the battle ahead would not be fought on a personal level. It would be a war between her and the Dominion itself. She would have to choose whether to fight for her freedom or to surrender to a fate she had never chosen. The next morning, the palace was eerily quiet. Serena had spent the night awake, thinking, strategizing, weighing her options. She had been trained all her life to be the princess, to rule, to lead, but none of her training had prepared her for this. The political landscape she had once navigated, with ease, had turned into a battlefield, and she was unsure of where to place her trust. Outside, the Vixari forces had begun to assemble. Serena could hear the distant rumble of their warships as they prepared for a demonstration of power. It was a show of force, an unmistakable message that the Council would not back down. As the day wore on, Adam stayed by her side, watching her every move with quiet vigilance. He was ready, but Serena could see the unease in his eyes. She knew that despite his confidence, he was as scared as she was. Neither of them knew what would happen when the Council's decision was handed down. Late in the afternoon, a sudden knock at the door broke the silence. A soldier entered, his face grim. "The Council has summoned you, Princess," the soldier said. "It is time." Serena's heart sank. This was it. There was no more time for hesitation. She stood, her legs feeling unsteady beneath her. Adam reached out to steady her, his hand a firm anchor in a sea of uncertainty. "Stay close to me," she whispered, "and don't let them break me." Adam nodded, his face set with determination. "I won't let them." The soldier led them through the corridors of the palace, the walls thick with tension. Every step they took seemed to echo through the empty halls, the silence pressing down on them like a physical weight. Serena felt the eyes of the servants and guards upon her, their gazes filled with a mixture of fear and admiration. Word of her defiance had spread, and everyone in the palace seemed to be holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. When they reached the council chamber, Serena's pulse quickened. She could hear the low murmur of voices inside, the deliberations of the council already in progress. As the doors opened, she was greeted by the cold, unfeeling gaze of Myrath. "You are late, Princess," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "But no matter. You've made your decision, and now we will make ours." Serena stepped into the room, her head held high. She could feel Adam's presence beside her, a silent reminder that she was not alone. The council members sat at their seats watching her with an almost predatory interest. Serena could sense their hunger, their desire to see her broken, to see her yield to their demands. But she would not give them the satisfaction. Not now. Not ever. Myrath stood, his dark eyes narrowing as he regarded her. "You've shown us your defiance, Princess. You've rejected the will of the Dominion, and for that you will pay the price." Serena met his gaze without flinching. "And what price is that, Myrath?" "You will be exiled, stripped of your title, your birthright. You will be cast out of the Dominion, to live among the humans you seem to hold in such high regard." The words hit Serena like a slap to the face. Exiled, stripped of everything she had known. But there was no fear in her heart, only resolve. If this was the price she had to pay for her freedom, then so be it. "I will accept your punishment," Serena said, her voice steady, "but I will not go quietly." Myrath's lips twisted into a cruel smile. "Then prepare yourself, Princess. This will be the last time you stand before us as one of our own." Serena glanced at Adam, who stood by her side, unwavering. He didn't need to say anything. His presence spoke volumes. as the council chamber. Doors closed behind them. The fate of the princess was sealed. But Serena knew this was not the end. It was only the beginning. The air was thick with tension as Serena stood at the threshold of the council chamber. Exile. It was the final sentence the Dominion had passed on her. It was a punishment meant to strip her of everything. Her title, her power, her past, and cast her into a future unknown. The weight of that future loomed before her, heavier than any chains. Yet as she stood in the cold silence of the chamber, Serena realized one undeniable truth. The Dominion could take everything from her, but they could never take her will. As the council members murmured in the background, Serena felt Adam's hand on her shoulder, a steadying presence amidst the storm that raged within her. She had fought for this moment, the moment she chose freedom over submission, and now there was no turning back. "My decision stands," Serena said, her voice clear and unwavering. "I will not go quietly into the exile you've planned for me. I will fight, and I will not be silenced." Mirath, who had remained seated throughout her declaration, finally rose from his place at the head of the council. His cold eyes locked onto Serena's, and for a moment she saw something in them that sent a chill through her. It wasn't just hatred or anger, it was fear. Fear of what she might become, fear of the shift in power that she represented. "You have chosen this path, princess, and you will pay the price." Myrath's voice was a low growl, filled with venom. "Your exile will not just be physical, it will be total. You will lose everything." But as Myrath spoke, Serena felt something stir inside her. The truth was that she had already lost everything. Her status, her title, her birthright, they were just labels. What mattered now was the legacy she would leave behind, the fight she would wage and the people she would inspire. "I am already lost," she said softly, her gaze not leaving his. "But I am not broken." The council members remained silent, some exchanging uncertain glances. They had expected fear, maybe even surrender, but they weren't getting that. They weren't getting what they wanted, and for the first time, Serena saw a crack in a facade of their power. The doors of the council chamber opened with a loud creak, and the soldier who had escorted Serena to the chamber stepped forward. His face was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes that Serena caught immediately, a subtle shift, a message unspoken but clear. "The shuttle is ready, princess," the soldier announced, his voice stiff. Serena turned toward Adam, and in that moment their gazes met and something passed between them, unspoken but understood. The time for words was over. It was time for action. Adam took her hand and led her out of the council chamber, ignoring the disapproving stares of the council members as they watched the princess walk out in defiance of their decree. Serena could feel the weight of their eyes on her, but it didn't matter. They had no power over her anymore, not in the way they once did. As they made their way through the palace corridors, Serena's mind raced. She couldn't help but think of the consequences, of the unknown dangers that lay ahead. Exile meant isolation. It meant being cut off from everything she had known. But even in the midst of her uncertainty, there was something else she felt. Freedom. The shuttle was waiting on the palace landing pad, its engines humming in quiet anticipation. Serena could hear the sound of distant warships moving through the skies, the Dominion's threat still present, but now, somehow, distant. The shuttle's captain stood beside the hatch, ready to escort her to her fate. As she stepped into the shuttle, Serena turned to Adam. "Where will we go?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. Adam looked at her with determination in his eyes. "Wherever we need to. We'll find a way to survive." Serena nodded, her heart heavy, but her spirit unbroken. They were no longer bound by the rules of the Dominion. They were free. In a way they had always been free, but now it was real. And with that freedom came both hope and uncertainty. The shuttle took off with a sudden lurch, and Serena watched. Through the small port window as the palace, her home, faded into the distance. The city stretched out below them, a sprawling metropolis filled with the people who had once worshipped her, once feared her. Now she was just another exile, a lost princess, cast adrift in the stars. But she wasn't truly lost. Not yet. Hours passed, and the shuttle journeyed through the empty void of space. The stars outside were little more than pinpricks of light, distant and indifferent. Serena sat in silence, her thoughts swirling like the nebulae outside. Adam had remained by her side, but his eyes were distant, lost in his own thoughts. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we had chosen differently? Serena asked, breaking the silence. What if I hadn't defied them? What if I had just accepted my role as the obedient princess? Adam's gaze met hers, and for a moment she saw a flicker of something in his eyes. It wasn't regret. It was a kind of quiet understanding. We don't get to choose the world we're born into, Serena, but we do get to choose what we do with it. Serena thought about his words. There had been times when she had wished things were different, when she had longed for the simplicity of her old life. But as she thought of the people she had left behind, the lives that depended on the choices she had made, she knew deep down that this was the only choice she could have made. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for the future, for a world where the Dominion's rule wouldn't be the only way. Suddenly, the shuttle's warning lights flickered, pulling Serena out of her thoughts. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Captain speaking. We've detected an incoming vessel. It's not responding to our signals. Brace yourselves." Serena's heart skipped a beat. She knew what this meant. This wasn't just an accident. This was a pursuit. "Hold on," Adam said, his voice tight as he gripped her arm. "We're not alone out here. The shuttles." Engines roared to life as the vessel began to maneuver at a breakneck speed, veering into evasive actions. Serena's pulse quickened. She could hear the sound of blaster fire echoing through the hull. The Dominion had found them, but they wouldn't go down without a fight. "We're not running anymore," Serena said, her voice filled with resolve. "We're going to face them." Adam looked at her, a fire igniting in his eyes. "Then let's make sure they know who they're dealing with." The shuttle's weapons systems powered up, and Serena felt a surge of adrenaline course through her veins. This was it, the final stand. They had nothing left to lose, but everything to gain. The enemy ship was closing in, its massive form taking shape against the backdrop of stars. It was a warship, unmistakable in its design, a symbol of the Dominion's might. But Serena didn't flinch. She didn't back down. This was the moment she had been waiting for. For the first time since this entire ordeal began, Serena realized that she wasn't just a princess. She wasn't just a pawn in a game of politics. She was a warrior, and she would fight for her freedom. The battle had just begun.